Man, what's good? What's good? Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark. This is GC Live, Gamecock Central Live, brought to you by Affordable Medical USA. You can find them at affordablemedicalusa.com. They are, of course, home of the game day chair, the absolute best way to watch the game at home. Get your own game day chair at affordablemedicalusa.com, or if you're on YouTube or listening on the podcast version, just click the link in the show summary. It'll take you straight to the game day chair, or you can give them a call at 803-926-1493. They are our primary sponsor here of GC Live and make the show, the daily part of this show, possible. So, of course, appreciate them. And we appreciate our new sponsor, Dead Soxy, who we will tell you a little bit more about later on in the show as we continue to break down South Carolina versus Texas A&M this Saturday night, Williams-Brice Stadium, and really what is a key matchup for South Carolina, a key game. I mean, right off the bat, it never ends. It doesn't stop, Chris. This all SEC schedule, we've talked about it ever since we knew this was going to be the case, but there's no let up, man. There's no sort of get right opponent. Obviously, South Carolina had the bye week to sort of, maybe focus on some fundamentals, get back to, basics in some cases. But as far as opponents go, you're right back playing in the SEC and an underdog for South Carolina, which they have been pretty much every year they've played A&M during the Muschamp era.
Yeah, typically been close. And as we talk about often, man, you got to let every game stand on its own. Just because a game has traditionally been close between two teams, a lot of times you end up seeing that sort of streak being broken. But there's some reasons to think that if South Carolina plays up to its capability, which is a question because they did not last week, obviously, or last game against LSU, that this one could be close, and some of the same sort of cast of characters that we've seen at Texas A&M, namely Kellen Mond, obviously. Jimbo Fisher's still the coach there, so similar offensive style. So in some regards, we know what they're going to bring to the field. We know what they're going to bring to this game. We don't know which sort of version, I guess, of South Carolina that we're going to see. And there's obviously, as we've continued to dig into this matchup more and more, man, we talked about it during yesterday's show. There's a lot to be concerned about in terms of what A&M can do, the challenges that they can present. But I do expect a game that's, highly competitive. And that's what we've seen most of the year for South Carolina, with the exception of the LSU game where it got out of hand. South Carolina has been competitive against other opponents. And I think you nailed it yesterday. You've got sort of teams at the top of the SEC. And maybe if you want to go more in a broad sense, maybe at the top of college football. And then everybody else is going to be fairly closer. In the SEC, you're going to get some outlier games, I don't know that anybody saw Auburn whipping LSU last week. I don't know that anybody saw LSU whipping South Carolina the week before. But generally, South Carolina should be able to stay in the ballpark with the teams that they play, and they've done that this year with the exception of the LSU game. So it'll be really fascinating, I think, to watch this one play out.
Yeah, and I don't normally, Chris, especially when it comes to injuries, don't really like to speculate on rumors and stuff like that, but it is out there. It's on our message board. It's on other message boards. We're being asked about it on here. Yes, there is a rumor Jamar Brown has another injury. I've heard it. Obviously, several people elsewhere have heard it. Cannot confirm that right now. I have heard it from places other than just online. So take that for what it's worth, but we obviously will wait and see what the actual status is there from Will Muschamp. And there's some talk that Eric Shaw has been playing some defense in practice. I've heard that, both the rumors online and I've heard it elsewhere. And I'll just say, we'll put it like this. I would say that it's a situation, and Kyle says that Cloninger reported on JB and Goldwater. Well, the part that I heard, Cloninger said exactly what we just said, that he had heard it, but it was not confirmed. Obviously not confirmed by the school at this point. So we'll just sort of leave it at that. But as far as Eric Shaw, let's talk about it just as a hypothetical, because I do have reason to believe that's true. And that's always been a guy. I mean, I remember Chris, Greg Ladke, who does Rivals.com, a lot of our video stuff. And he's all around. He sees a bunch of different guys. I remember him being at that Mississippi Alabama All-Star game, and Shaw was playing defense at that, and being like, dang, this is the guy who looked like a 5-star prospect. If you just put your eyes out there and didn't know who was ranked what, alongside another 5-star kid, you would have said Shaw was the guy that looked like the 5-star. Now, I had heard some very strong early indications on Shaw just athletically, some things he had done in practice as far as being an athletic mismatch, making some plays on the offensive side of the ball. So I think if you look at that, it makes sense from a skill set standpoint. We'll see if this is a long-term thing. We'll see if this is frankly, an emergency thing right now. If Brown is out at linebacker, then I think Shaw is more of a future, if he's on the defensive side, future sort of buck. You want his pass rush juice getting after the quarterback. But we've seen this staff in the past when you start to get banged up at spots, or when you're looking for a particular skill set at a position, you move guys around and try to find it. So I don't know. I think it's true, but even with it being true, we don't know. Does that mean we're going to see it on the field this year, or is it more like a sort of, let's go ahead and start this for the future,
Right. And that is the key question. The fact that he's there isn't a huge shock. We the moment he enrolled, we knew they loved him during recruiting. South Carolina staff did. I remember exactly what you're talking about with Aggie during that Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game. Shaw had a great week. He had a great game. The other 5-star that you referenced was Alabama signee Demoy Kennedy, who, as you said, was a 5-star kid. And Shaw was the guy that flashed, at least that week, even more than him. And so we knew that when he got to South Carolina, athletically, he had a lot of just almost freakish traits. When you looked at his size profile, the frame to get bigger, he's got a huge hand size. This is something I've thrown out in the past, and whether he's at tight end or defensive end, short or long term, but they recruited him as a tight end originally. And Eric Shaw's hands coming out of high school were bigger than like 9 of the first 10 tight ends that were taken in that year's NFL draft. So, hand size is one of those weird things that sometimes when you get a certain size hand, you just end up getting freak athletes. And so we always sort of joked after they signed Eric Shaw, from what we were hearing inside the program, that there's going to be some fights between the offensive and defensive staff, right? About, which side of the ball is he going to end up being on? Is one side going to try to fight for him? And obviously either side would really like to have him. So I do think it's interesting that, you've been hearing that, Wes, about moving him over to defense and seeing what he can do. Does that mean he's going to go play a ton of snaps this weekend? I would not think so. Whether it's a short-term stopgap or whether it's something they look at in the future, athletically, he can do it. This isn't like a square peg, round hole type thing, right? I mean, it's not like this guy doesn't fit there. If they choose to put him on that path for the future, he's got a chance to be really good. And I feel the same way about tight end too.
Yeah. Cartwright asked, I'm confused. What is the buzz about Shaw? Buzz being that he's been working at defense some in practice, working in there as sort of a pass rush buck type guy. I think, for what I've heard, again, you don't get a whole lot out of practice at this place these days, but that is floating around out there. And generally, like I said, I don't really like to deal with speculation, but because we have heard it elsewhere, and because it makes so much sense, and because it's something that's always been mentioned, it's worth talking about. And another question, does that mean good things for the tight end position for other guys, namely Jaheim Bell and Kevion Mullins? And I mean, Chris, I think and we'll see. I know, Muschamp said Mullins, they're projecting to have him back this week. We'll see. I mean, I know how ankles can be, so we'll see on Saturday. But if you want to talk about that position more the rest of the year and even down the line, future of that position, I think they've been very happy with what they've seen out of Mullins, his progression there. We saw 2 big plays from him as a mismatch at the tight end position against LSU. And Then, we all saw what Jaheim Bell could do athletically in high school. You start to hear some buzz about him now that he's back and healthy and able to go practice and get in there. It's going to be a question. Does he see the field, or how quickly does Jaheim Bell see the field? But to me, there's always two things at play, and this is where fans sometimes get frustrated. It's first question is, what can this guy do athletically compared to his teammates and opponents? The next question is he ready, to go do it, either from a size, strength, development in that sense standpoint, or just from knowledge and comfort level and timing and all those things. And it's not like NCAA football. It's not a video game where you can just plug the guy in and go pray. It's kind of, you have to develop trust and timing and all those things. But let's say from at least a skill set standpoint, I think Jaheim Bell has all the things Carolina's looking for. And then I think with Mullins, you would say from a skill set standpoint, and we're starting to see, before he got banged up and rolled the ankle, you're starting to see it from a comfort level, trust, actually on the field standpoint.
Yeah, and we know Mike Bobo likes to utilize tight ends in his offense. And I think back to at Georgia, when he had a couple guys in Aaron White and Orson Charles that really sort of played off each other, and they were two different types of tight ends. I think when you look at someone like Jaheim Bell, he fits into that Orson Charles type, and Kevion Mullins too, that Orson Charles type of role where they can be sort of a flex tight end. They can be a mismatch in the passing game. Is Jaheim Bell going to be a guy that you line up in line a ton and ask him to go block defensive ends? No. But he can definitely be a guy who can do some things in the passing game. You align him certain ways, he becomes difficult to count in terms of how you're covering him. Are you asking a linebacker to cover him in man? If so, that's probably going to be a mismatch. Are you losing him in zone? That can happen too. And so with Bell and Shaw, they're both guys that were pretty highly touted and coming in. The staff was excited about them, and there was a thought that they would have a chance to contribute this year. There are a lot of bodies in that tight end room, but not a lot of proven guys beyond Nick Muse, who even just had 1 year in the game, with the Gamecocks last year, not even in this offense. So the issue for them, just recovering from injuries. Bell had the knee, Shaw had the bone spurs, and we'll see what happens with him on a long-term basis. But these are both guys, going more back to Bell now, that missed, 6-8 weeks when you going back to the OTA period into preseason. And so that puts you behind, especially as a freshman in a new offense. They're young players. They've got learning to do, but athletically, you really like what they bring to the field. And that's, the exciting part if they can continue coming along. We've seen Mullins, flash against LSU and in other situations. And I think if Bell gets an opportunity at some point, he's got a chance to help too.
Yeah, we'll certainly see. And it's always, you always want to be talking about guys in the wings. Now, again, fans, I get it. The fan base, you read about these guys from us and other websites, and you hear about what they can do, and you're like, I want to see them on the field. I want to see what they can do. And you'll see some freshmen can do that. They're right on the field right off the bat. But sometimes we lose sight of how difficult I think that actually is to just go out there at this level and just play and just go do it. So I think we need perspective when it comes to all these guys. And it is, I'll admit it, it's at the point of the season, though. You start looking at the second half. You need more playmakers. You need more pass rush. Yeah, I get it. If I'm a fan, I'd sort of be like, hey, where are these guys as well? So we'll see. I think it'll be interesting. And some of these guys we're talking about, a Luke Doty maybe getting some more snaps at quarterback, stuff like that. Some of these situations, fans will probably end up happy. They're going to see it. And some of these situations, we've all seen it. You and I will be sitting here talking about it, and it's going to be a possibility. But then you see how a game plays. It's a lot of times determined by how a game actually plays out and flows as far as which of these game plan aspects they get to within the confines of that football game.
Yeah, and I think you look at when you talk about integrating Luke Doty, I think there's room to continue bringing him along. And we don't need to go back and really well, he should have played more in this game, that game. Those games are over. So we got to talk about what can he do starting even this weekend. And I think he's gotten his feet wet a little bit out there. Probably an opportunity for him to continue progressing and seeing his role increase. Maybe even let him go out and you let him throw a pass. They have a package for him. It's been discussed. Can he go out there and run the whole offense right now? There would be some limitations to that. You got to think about Mike Bobo's offense. Does have some complexities to it. I mean, they put some things on the quarterback there that not that Luke can't do it, but there aren't many freshman quarterbacks that come in anywhere, no matter the talent, no matter how smart they are, and they just get every single thing thrown at them at once. They're a first-year player in college. The game's very fast. And so they brought Luke along slowly in that regard, but athletically, he's on another level, obviously, than Colin Hill or Ryan Helinski. So, he can get in there. Certainly he can run the ball. There's probably some opportunities for him to pass the ball as well. And so that to me is one of the most interesting things to continue watching going forward. How much more does he play? Is it down around the red zone a little bit more when space is sort of constricted? Do you give that element there? That's where we've seen him, right? Already, I think the Vanderbilt game and LSU, we saw him down closer to enemy territory. So is it even more of that? Is it more of the same? Or are there even some opportunities, earlier in the game or in different situations to get him in there? So be really interested to see that. And then what they do with other personnel moves. Are there some other guys, whether it's a Jaheim Bell, that steps in offensively and gets some more opportunities?
Yeah, all will be very interesting to see going forward. As I said, we've got AggieYell.com's Mark Passwaters coming up here shortly. Chris, before we do that, we already told everybody a little bit about the game day chair earlier in the show. So let's switch gears. Tell everybody a little bit about Dead Soxy. Do you got your Dead Soxy socks with you?
Yeah, I mean, it was so controversial yesterday. So keep in mind about the colors, guys, that these the lighting's a little different, but these are sort of a blue color. And can you see these? Yep. And these are the no-shows, and then they also have their boardroom sort of dress sock. The cool thing about these, they're super premium material. They are advertised as buttery soft, and at first I was like, buttery soft? You put them on, this is indeed the case. They feel like butter. It's sort of crazy. And then no-slip technology. So they're soft, they're buttery, but they don't slip up and down. If you're going to church, if you're wearing dress socks for a business meeting, sometimes you're like, man, these socks are slipping up and down. They don't. So premium fabrics, they're made extremely well. They're really, really high quality. So you should check those guys out. And here's the cool thing. Dead Soxy, for our listeners, you get $10 off your first order. You can get $10 just right at checkout automatically. All you got to do is enter your email address. And so we've actually got a link on GamecockCentral.com in our chat. And I think I put it on the YouTube description today also, Wes. And you can, I'm not going to X-rate it. No. But check that out and check out our link. Make sure you see Dead Soxy's selection, men's and women's. Get $10 off by using our link. And we appreciate their support of the show as well.
Yeah, if y'all give me a second, I'm going to throw that link in here right now. Everybody loves free stuff. So
yeah, no doubt.
Get $10 off, a free $10. I'll take it. All right, y'all, let's go out right now. Y'all know this system is a little bit clunky. So I'm going to go out right now and we're going to go to Mark Passwaters, who joined me a little bit earlier today to chat about the Gamecocks and to tell us sort of about the Aggie perspective going into this game. Mark Passwaters, AggieYell.com, part of the Rivals Network, covering Texas A&M. Mark, we were just talking a little off the air. How's everything going y'all's way? I guess it's a little bit different for all of us this year, but still just rolling along, I would guess.
Well, it's good when you've got a good football team to watch, and so far they have been. Outside of an absolute clunker at Alabama, which apparently is not something unique to them. It's been a good year, and they played their best football the last 3 games, and they'll need to have that going when they go to Columbia this weekend because, in spite of the fact that A&M's won all those games, they've been tight.
Yeah, it's been an interesting series. We were talking earlier this week, Chris Clark and I, and it's sort of like, for me, you go into every single one of these games, and it's like A&M has always sort of been a favorite, I think, since Muschamp has been here, but it's always sort of right around that touchdown favorite mark. You always go in, you sort of say A&M should win this game, but then Carolina always sort of finds a way to hang around. They make it just interestingly enough, and then A&M ends up sort of making enough plays to win in the end. So it has been kind of strange that way.
Yeah, it's one of those games where you walk into the press box in Columbia and you're like, okay, this is going to be nice and easy. And by the end, you're sweating it, very, very seriously sweating it. And then last year, keeping all those things in mind, you walk into Kyle Field and you're sweating it, and then A&M blows them out. So, go figure. But I think that A&M would be wise to go in expecting a dogfight in this game, considering, Carolina really needs a win. They've had a week off to prepare. And, you're number 7. And what would be better for a team right now than to knock you out permanently from the CFP hunt?
Mark, so I'll start very, very broad. Tell us, what do we need to know about this Texas A&M team? What has sort of been their MO so far? Like you said, a tough loss to Alabama, a little bit of I would say a little bit of a weird game, I guess, against Vandy. But for the most part, they've sort of been rolling the last few weeks. What have we sort of learned about this group through 5 games of the season?
Well, they're not your Kevin Sumlin Aggies, that's for sure. These guys are physical. They're tough. They don't quit. And they do things that SEC teams are supposed to do. They run the football, and for the most part, they stop the run. One of the strange things last weekend against Arkansas was the fact that the Hogs ran on them pretty good. And you take a look at the games, even Alabama, the Tide did not run on A&M. But I think that a lot of that had to do with the fact that Arkansas had that week off, and they basically completely changed their offense to go against A&M. And they did a great job with that. And that's one of the things that makes Arkansas interesting this year is Sam Pittman does a really good job, and he does a lot on the fly. But, the Aggies have really established a strong running game. The offensive line, which has been not good the last several years, has been excellent this year. Maybe the nation's best. They've given up 2 sacks, and I think that's debatable because I think one of them was actually a run. But they have controlled the line of scrimmage against good defenses, and there have been plays in every game, at least the last 3, where, well, not plays, but series, where they have sat there and said, okay, this is it. You're done. And they have just taken over the line of scrimmage, and it's been a series, 8 plays, 9 plays, where it's just all runs. And it's been Isaiah Spiller. It's been Aniyah Smith. Now it's Devin Achane, who is an absolute speed merchant. But Florida, Mississippi State, and Arkansas last weekend, all 3 of those games were pretty much settled in this one series where the Aggie offensive line came out and said, no, you're finished, and just took over the game. And that's something, honestly, we haven't seen from the Aggies since R.C. Slocum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think if you're a Carolina fan watching this, you talked about sweating in the press box earlier. Carolina fans just started getting cold sweats after watching LSU sort of run up and down the field on South Carolina. Took the air out of the ball early on in that game and just established the run, and that was it. What has been, to your eyes, the biggest difference for this offensive line? I know you said they struggled some previous years. What has is it just, I know they returned several guys. Has it been just getting comfortable, another year in the weight program? What's been the biggest difference as far as the development of that unit from the last couple of years to now what they are, this year?
Well, I think that it's a lot of things, really. You nailed a couple right there. You take a look at that offensive line, and it returns 4 starters. Left tackle Dan Moore, left guard Kenyon Green, right guard Jared Hocker, right tackle Carson Green. All these guys played in the game last year. Ryan McCollum is the center, and he's a new guy as a redshirt senior with 17 career starts. So, You're not talking about inexperience here. And they have just taken a quantum leap forward. People thought they'd be better. Last year, they were absolutely abysmal in pass blocking. They were 102nd in the league in sacks allowed, or in the nation in sacks allowed. This year, they're second. And the only team ahead of them is Air Force, who runs the triple option. So does that even count? So you take a look at that, and they're just light years better. They're bigger, they're stronger. But I think the big thing is that they really have an understanding of what offensive line coach Josh Henson wants them to do. He was a first-year guy last year. I think there's a bit of a disconnect there. But these guys have really improved way beyond anything that I would have expected. And, that's a positive thing for the Aggies, especially in the SEC, because this isn't a gimmick here. They're not winning games the way Sumlin did, just throwing the ball around the place and hoping to shoot it out with people. They're taking the air out of the ball. They're running the clock. They're consistently running the football and pass blocking. And these are basic fundamental things which you absolutely need to win in this league.
Can you talk to us a little bit about Kellen Mond now? I feel like making his 15th consecutive start against South Carolina, it feels like he's been there forever now. I mean, I remember seeing Mond as a freshman, and he comes in, he's this high-profile 5-star guy, super flashy, and you sort of got the impression, he's this dual-threat guy that can do so many different things. I get the impression, at least outside looking in, he's sort of settled into exactly what he's supposed to do within this offense. Looking at the numbers, 12 touchdowns. He's not turning the football over. Like you said, he's not taking sacks. Is my sort of read on that correct, that he's just sort of settled into exactly what they're looking for from that position within this offense?
Yeah, you nailed it. And just because he's been there since the first term of George W. Bush doesn't mean he's been on campus a long time. But yes, honestly, he is much, much improved. The biggest thing for Kellen Mond has never been athletic ability or talent, like you pointed out. It's been really between the ears. He has been indecisive. He's taken sacks that he shouldn't have because he refused to get rid of the ball. He hasn't taken off and run when he should have. This year, he's doing that. And you really saw that, especially last weekend against Arkansas. My biggest gripe with him has been, when the opportunity is there to take off and run, you have the talent to do it. And there was no hesitation with that last weekend. If he saw an opportunity, he pulled the ball down and he went. And that kept drives alive, put them in third and short situations that they were able to convert. And he's just a lot smarter with his reads. He's getting the ball out quicker. He said that he trusts his eyes now. And that's one thing I don't think that he did before. There was always that element of self-doubt. And maybe he's kind of shut that off. But there's no question that 2 of the best 3 games of his career have been Florida and Arkansas. The Mississippi State game was okay, but they didn't really need him to do much. They just went out and beat him up on the ground. But if he continues to play the way that he did last weekend against Florida, then A&M is multidimensional and becomes very tough to stop.
And what's your read sort of on the guys around him, the skill players? Obviously, we know about Isaiah Spiller. We see the numbers being put up there. At least statistically, South Carolina has a passing game where it's sort of all Shi Smith. It's one guy. Statistically, it looks like A&M has spread the ball around quite a bit. Several guys are in that sort of, 17, 18, 19 to 20 catch range. And then can you tell us about this young tight end? I mean, it seems like South Carolina has a stretch now. They're just playing NFL tight ends or future NFL tight ends every other week now. We saw the kid at LSU. Gilbert was really good. Pitts at Florida is amazing. And now Texas A&M's guy looks pretty awesome as well. So what can you tell us about those skill guys?
Well, we'll start with the tight end because you brought it up. Jalen Weidermeyer is special. You go back a couple of years ago, and one play that Carolina fans, I'm sure, don't want to talk about is Jay Sternberger going over the middle and carrying the secondary for 30 yards. This guy's bigger than Sternberger by about 20 pounds, and he's about as fast. He's got better footwork. He just ate Arkansas alive last weekend, and they were double teaming him. They were playing zones that they were trying to bait Mond into throwing. He went, okay, fine, boom, here it is. And they could not handle Weidermeyer. And that's been a big element in their success. If Jimbo Fisher's offense is going to work, the tight end is going to be a key element. So you've got that. But I think the interesting thing for Carolina fans is going to be when J.C. Horn comes out Saturday and goes and covers a slot, or he waits for a running back, because that's Anais Smith, 0. And this kid is crazy. He's just a big play machine. He doesn't look like much. He's 5'10", $190, something like that. He starts at running back, but he's the team's leading receiver. They cut him out in the slot. And last week, he had his first two touches were touchdowns. One was a run, one was a catch. Every 9 touches, he scores. So he's a machine. He leads the team in receptions and yards. He's second in rushing. He's just a lot of fun to watch. Chase Lane is a kid that's come on as one of the receivers. I think the biggest gripe I would have is they really need to develop another wide receiver. And we all thought that was going to be 5-star Demond Demas, and he hadn't done anything yet. But they got Hezekiah Jones back last week. He's a redshirt junior, hadn't played in virtually 2 years. And he came in and he was big on third downs, and that was clutch. But that's the thing they got to do. They got to find another outside receiver to kind of take some of this pressure off of Smith or Weidemeyer, because a smart defensive coordinator is going to try to take one of those guys away. You're not going to take both. But if you can limit one of those, then you make life more difficult for Mond.
Let's go to the defensive side. Obviously, well, I tell you, it sort of feels like, and maybe this is just because we're all the way out here. I don't get to see as many Texas A&M games, maybe as I see some of the East teams, but it feels like maybe these guys aren't quite as well known around the conference. But then you look at what they've been able to do defensively, and much like you sort of talked about on the offensive side, it's kind of like a prototypical SEC defense. You look, there's several guys who can rush the passer. You got a couple of very productive linebackers that'll hit you, a safety that'll knock your head off. And then, Colin Hill, the quarterback, was saying, these are some really athletic guys in the secondary. So what you see them every week. What's sort of your evaluation of this defense so far, and sort of the mold that this defense is built in?
It's, again, the classic SEC style. Run the ball, stop the run. That's what A&M is out to do. They have a very big, very athletic defensive front. You take a look at guys, you look at the depth chart and you're like, why is A&M starting a 290-pound defensive end in DeMarvin Leal? Because he can move like he's 250. That's the difference. You're talking about a 5-star, a unique talent. This kid's only a sophomore. He's just starting to really, tap into his potential. So you got him on one end. Michael Clemens is a JUCO kid they've had for a couple of years. They've been waiting for him to break out. He's second. He's tied with Enigbare with 4 sacks. Second in the SEC. He's 270. Then you go into the middle. Jaden Peavy's 300. Bobby Brown's 335. They got a true freshman in McKinley Jackson who's played well. He's 335. These guys are up there with the intention of stop the run first. And with the exception of last weekend, which is a concern because you don't want to repeat, they've done that. They held Mississippi State to -2 yards. Granted, it's Mississippi State, and they don't run on anybody, but that's still very impressive. They outgained Alabama on the ground. They shut down Najee Harris. Nobody else has done that. Florida didn't run the ball. So, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to establish the front and then push back. And then Buddy Johnson has been the guy to be there to clean up the mess. The linebacker, he's got 54 tackles. His career high is 77. He might break that in 2 weeks. Yeah, he's well on his way to 100 tackles. The linebacker play has been solid, fun, spectacular. They've had some problems with some mental mistakes and missed tackles, and that's been A&M's biggest problem is missing tackles. They've missed a lot, especially in the secondary. It's led to some big plays, but the corners have been pretty good. Miles Jones is a guy that Carolina fans will recall because Bentley went after him a lot 2 years ago. He came in the game after I think it was Davion Renfro got ejected, and they immediately started trying to go deep on him with limited success. The other guy is Jalen Jones. He's a true freshman, another one of those 5-stars. Both of those guys have played pretty well. It's been the safeties that have been the disappointment. Damani Richardson and Leon O'Neal have been up and down. Guys have gotten in the middle of the field, beaten them deep, a lot of missed assignments. But of course, when you play Florida and Alabama, they're going to get you. There's no two ways about that. Against mere mortals, they're giving up 16 points a game, and that's, I think, where they want to be. And I think the big thing tomorrow for them is going to be, or not tomorrow, but Saturday will be, can you stop those big running backs for Carolina? And if Colin Hill has to throw, with 16 sacks already, and A&M's got 10 in the last 2 games, I don't think that's where USC wants to be.
So I feel like I've heard the phrase the path to victory and other things in life for the last 2 days. So tell us a path for, if you're South Carolina, if you're on this end of things, where's a path for South Carolina to win this game? I would say, in terms of, if you have a concern about A&M from what you've seen so far, what would be your biggest 1 or 2 things where you say that could be an area to watch from a South Carolina end?
Running the ball enough to get Hill some time so they can hit some big plays deep. I know that that's been something they haven't really had a lot of success with yet, but Shi Smith's a really good wideout. Mm-hmm. There are guys there with potential, and this could be a time when they're just like, okay, we got to turn you loose, go do something. Mm-hmm. If they can do that, then that's, A&M is giving up some big plays deep, and that's something that should be a concern for the Aggies. The other is turnovers. If A&M turns the ball over, they give up points. It's pretty simple. And that's something that they have avoided the last few weeks. But you take a look at it, the one turnover they've had was a pick 6 against Mississippi State. And that's something that they just absolutely have to avoid. If they can hold on to the football, they can run the ball, and they can slow down Harris, then A&M's in good shape. But if Carolina, in turn, can run the ball and then get Hill some time and they can hit some plays deep, then it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, and we'll see how those things play out Saturday night, Williams-Brice Stadium. And there's one other thing I was curious about. How has A&M been in the red zone, both offensively, defensively? That's a thing that we focus on that a lot here, because South Carolina has been one of those teams that they've actually been really good in the red zone offensively. Defensively, when they've been good, that's when they sort of hang around in games. And when they haven't, LSU, when they let teams score touchdowns down there, that's when they sort of get, blown out.
Well, A&M on the plus side was very good in the red zone last weekend against Arkansas. Mm-hmm. They got in there 4 times, 4 touchdowns. They scored on 6 straight drives, so there's not much to complain about. But on the other hand, if you get inside the 20 against A&M, you're probably going to score. Mm-hmm. They're giving up 93%, or now almost 94% scoring inside. If you get inside the 20, the trick is getting inside the 20. Once you do that, you're in good shape. But so that's one of the reasons that I say turnovers is a big deal. You don't want to give them short fields. If somebody gets it in close, they're going to punch it in. And I think that is a big source of frustration, with Mike Elko and this defense, is if somebody does get it down close, they're getting it in the end zone.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff, Mark. If our viewers, our listeners want to check you out, it's AggieYale.com. Y'all go check out the Texas A&M side of things and read up on the team before Saturday. Mark, you got any final thoughts on the game?
Wish I was going to be there. I always love coming over to Carolina, and darn you COVID-19, because that kills a family trip. But I'm obviously hoping for an A&M win, but more importantly, I just really don't want to sweat one.
Yeah, it should be interesting. We'll see what happens Saturday. And I think you're right, man. I mean, it's all going to come down to the running game, I think, on both sides, because for Carolina, they've had to have that. When they've had that, it has opened up some other things. When they have not, you saw it against LSU, pass rush gets there pretty quick when the opponent does not have to worry about the running game. And as you've said, A&M has been really good at getting to the passer. So it's not really hard to sort of look into the crystal ball and see what could happen if Carolina cannot run the football and if they can't stop the run on defense. So we'll see Saturday night, Williams-Brice Stadium. All your great coverage on AggieYale.com and GamecockCentral.com. Mark, we appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right, take care.
And there you have it, Mark Passwaters talking a little Gamecocks versus Aggies. I gotta ask first before we get back into the game, Chris. Do you get a little Frank Caliendo vibe
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Mark?
You should have brought that up to Mark.
Well, I don't really know him like that, and I was sitting there the whole time. I was like, man, this guy reminds me of somebody. And
Yeah, you're right.
Chris ditched me on the interview, and so I was sitting there like, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna bring it up, but I was like, this guy. Well, at first I was trying to figure out who he reminded me of, and then at first I thought John Madden. Then I was like, no, it's Frank Caliendo as John Madden that
There you
is
go.
in my head. So am I on to something there?
No, I can definitely see that. I would say more Caliendo than Caliendo is Madden, right?
Okay,
That'd be where I would fall on that. Frank Caliendo would be a great guest on GC Live. Open invite if he's listening. I'm sure he is.
Yeah, that would be great.
Come on, do some Lou Holtz impressions and things of that nature.
Yeah, although there's some former Gamecocks, man, that have some outstanding Lou. If we wanted to have a Lou Holtz impression battle,
yes,
yeah.
Courtney Levitt.
I was about to say Courtney Levitt's.
Who else does one? I don't know if I've heard any other ones.
I think Kimry has one.
Kimry does have one. It's really good. Kimry does. He also does a Brad Lawing that's pretty funny.
Oh man,
you remember his Brad Lawing?
We could have him as Brad Lawing.
Yeah.
You as Lance Thompson. Yeah. Me as Eric Wolford. Yep. And Courtney as Lou Holtz as our guest. That's an off-season show right there.
Right there.
That will do. Yeah. That would be awesome. I think Kimry had Lawing on this past week, so we'll give him a little free plug there. Go check out the Fade In. Always good when he gets Brad Lawing on there talking about the good old days of recruiting at South Carolina and elsewhere. So anyway, man, I mean, somebody on here said, who was it? Somebody said this guy is a bit of a homer. I mean, you can tell Mark is very dialed in with A&M. I mean, some people probably think we're homers too, man. I mean, when you're following a team very closely, you obviously look at everything through the prism of that team, of that program. But they've got some dudes, I mean, I think you look across the board, there's not really a lot of just clear weaknesses with this Aggie team.
Mm-hmm.
Now, okay, if you want to start to get deeper and say, where are there some possible areas South Carolina could exploit? I think, you listen to him sort of a little bit in the same range of something I was talking about earlier this week. And I didn't realize they'd had such trouble with missed tackles in the secondary. I know their defensive backs are pretty highly regarded coming in. The Richardson kid, I think, is the safety. I'm terrible with, unless it's a high profile guy, I'll remember numbers. Like if I'm watching a team in preparation, I'll remember numbers, but I forget names unless it's like a marquee dude. But Richardson, their safety, he wasn't as high on his play. He said he's been up or down. PFF, from what I saw, has been pretty high on that kid, I think. So I think if you're South Carolina, we all know it doesn't, you can take a random person off the streets and say, break down this game. And they can very easily, and it would be accurate, say running game, both for Carolina offensively and Carolina defensively. Keys to this game. That's very easy. But then I think the question becomes, where does Carolina attack off of that? If they can run the football, where we know Mike Bobo is going to look for matchups. Where can you find some matchup issues? Apparently, there have been some big plays in the secondary. I talked about how their linebackers, particularly the Buddy kid, has been picked on a little bit in the passing game. Mm-hmm. So you add that in with possibly some up and down play from safety, at least in Mark's opinion. And that tells me right now that's screaming vertically down the seam, attack them in that area, sort of behind the linebackers and in front of the safeties and in that seam area where a lot of times, in zone defenses, you have some holes there. And if South Carolina can establish the run and force those linebackers up to respect the run, then it opens up those areas that we're talking about. And then that's when it's on, a Nick Muse, Kevion Mullins, if he can play, maybe even some of these other tight ends to step in there and make some plays for South Carolina. But that would be something I would keep an eye on from a South Carolina perspective of how you could maybe attack these guys.
And that's why it's so important for South Carolina to be able to run the ball. It's so easy. Like I think you said it the other day, a lot of times these keys that we give and these things that we talk about that South Carolina has to do to win, sometimes they're very similar in every game. But for South Carolina, one of their keys every week is going to be run the ball. It's and until they prove that they can, it's going to be stop the run defensively, right? But the reason that running the football is so important for South Carolina is because that is the only thing that this team has done consistently for basically the entire year. And so that's why it's critical for them to do that, to stay in a game. Always, yeah. I mean, you go into any game, any team against any opponent, and you can say run the ball, and you'd be pretty accurate as a key, right? Unless you're, I don't know, running the air raid or something. And that hasn't worked out as well this year for Mike Leach in Mississippi State. But it's really important in this game because A&M is good at rushing the passer. When they get into some situations where they can tee off, they've shown that they can sack the quarterback. South Carolina's shown some vulnerabilities there, whether it's the offensive line or the backs and the tight ends or the quarterback holding the ball too long. But they have been vulnerable just overall. And the other reason you said, I guess the third component to it is that is maybe the vulnerability of this A&M team is, like you said, down the seams, matching up linebackers, maybe getting safeties out of position. So we know that Mike Bobo's got play action concepts off of basically anything that they run. So if you're making the defense cheat up, if they're devoting extra guys to stopping the run, then you're going to have even more opportunities there, whether it's just in the straight passing game or play action concepts, to hurt them, to hit them on some big plays. Now, the issue for South Carolina is because their running game's been not really the only consistent aspect, obviously A&M knows that going in. So Mike Elko, their defensive coordinator, and their team, they're going to be gearing up to stop the run. So that puts the onus on South Carolina to either counter that by backing them off, by passing the ball successfully with some other concepts, or just Mike Bobo getting creative and finding ways to run the ball. He's proven that he can do that. After game one, we knew, and especially game two, we knew Mike Bobo is going to run the football. So every team's gone in and known it as well, and they've still done it pretty well. And that's without an explosive passing game. So the key is, can they continue that? And then, like you said, red zone play, I think, on both sides of the ball is going to be critical. I wouldn't sit here and say, okay, and I know you're not saying that, but nobody listening needs to come away saying, oh, well, they're linebackers and they're safeties. Yeah, definite huge liability back there. Keep in mind, two of the teams they played, Florida and Alabama, really good skill guys, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're going to make any defense at times look bad. South Carolina doesn't have that type of explosion, at the skill position. So that's why I think running the ball is so critical.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's kind of like, for me, there are no clear weaknesses right now with this A&M team. So then it sort of becomes, okay, where can you find a path? Where can you find something that you maybe can exploit? And then if you do, it maybe opens up some other things for you. So I think we'll see. Antonio asked, is the A&M defense overly aggressive? I haven't watched enough of them from like a scheme standpoint on defense to really say. I do know they're pretty aggressive from a pass rush standpoint, just from a mindset standpoint. I mean, they're going to get after you, but they stop the run really for the most part against most teams, and then put themselves in a position where they can gear towards rushing the passer and getting after the quarterback and stuff like that. Now, I will say, interestingly enough, Arkansas, if you're South Carolina, you're watching what Arkansas was able to do in the running game. Mark mentioned it a couple times. Arkansas was able to run the football with them. They're able to run the ball with their backs, and they actually got Felipe Franks, who we're all familiar with from his time at Florida, not the most athletic guy, not a run first guy, but can do it, can run the football. They got him involved early on in that game in the QB running game. Obviously, that's not going to be much of what South Carolina does with Colin Hill, but sort of speaks to the idea of, do you get Luke Doty more involved potentially in this game? We'll see, and we'll see. I mean, it's always a chess match because clearly South Carolina, they watch the tape of every game their opponent has played this year. Well, A&M will watch that same tape and say, what did Arkansas do to us? And they'll try to clean that up. So what Arkansas did may be available to South Carolina. It may not be. It may be that Arkansas had some advantages at certain spots that maybe weren't sure about. Pittman at Arkansas, I think, does a really good job. Obviously with offensive line, with his background, and you look at Bryles over there. He's very well respected. So could you maybe look at that game plan and take a little bit away from that potentially? But you never know if it's something from an athletic and matchup standpoint that your group can sort of emulate or not. So we'll find all that out on Saturday. Let's see if we have a few more questions here, Chris. Don't see. Craig says, how many times did he say 5-star? They have a ton of them. I know, Chris, you have your star power today. How does the star power sort of match up?
Yeah, I mean, A&M has more. I mean, Craig's exactly right. When you look at how many 5-stars are on their team, they certainly have more than South Carolina. If you're just matching it up, stacking it up, which is the point of that piece, they definitely have more. I mean, Kellen Mond, is a former 5-star. They got a lot of 4-stars on there. A bunch of their starters are. Let me go through here and look real quick. I mean, they have their offensive line is actually, they got one 5-star and then some other just sort of mid-range 3-star type guys. But then you go over to the secondary, Jalon Jones, who's a freshman out of Texas from the 2020 class who plays for them. He was a 5-star. But, yeah, I mean, they got a few 5-stars in that mix. They got some 4-stars in that mix, more 4s than 5s. But certainly they're impressive, with what they've got. McKinley Jackson, another 2020 guy as a freshman. He was a top 100 player. DeMarvin Leal, who is the big, 290-pounder that Mark talked about. He was a top 10 recruit in the 2019 class and a 5-star. So certainly they've got some national level guys coming out of high school that are on that roster who are still young as well.
Yeah, you go back to previously before Jimbo even got there, man. I mean, they've recruited guys on paper.
Yep.
Very, very well. So they've always had talent. And again, it's been interesting. Like I said to Mark, man, you go into this game and, Mark sort of said A&M blew South Carolina out last year, but you look at the score and really the way the game played out, it never felt like South Carolina was in that game, but it was 13-3 going into the fourth quarter. So it was kind of a situation where they were able to hang around. And in this game, the last really 5 years, South Carolina has hung around against Texas A&M. So we'll see if that remains the case this weekend or not. And I don't know. We'll find out. I think a little bit of recruiting worth mentioning here, Chris, and that being South Carolina with a very intriguing offer to John Staten, a linebacker, grad transfer, originally from the Atlanta area, and a kid that has already entered the transfer portal from Samford. He was an FCS All-American there, first team All-SoCon, 116 sacks last year.
Golly, 116 sacks?
116 tackles last year. Yeah, that the water boy.
Exactly.
116 tackles. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
But I think this is this may be a trend I think we're going to see, Chris, because there's gonna be a lot of dudes at every level that all of a sudden have one more year of eligibility the way things went this year. So I think around the SEC, certainly at South Carolina, you're going to see the transfer portal, particularly, if guys are eligible to come in as a grad transfer or they're eligible to come in and play right away anyway, depending on what the NCAA does with the one-time transfer thing. I think you're going to see more and more of this at positions of need for South Carolina. Reading between the lines, maybe the linebacker position. Certainly, wide receiver would make a lot of sense. I think that's something maybe we can start to anticipate moving forward.
Yeah, it's something that we've already heard. Didn't hear linebacker specifically, but it's not surprising. We did hear, Wes, wide receiver is one that you can watch for the future for obvious reasons, and the portal, I think, is going to be pretty significant for South Carolina next year. As you said, not only the current climate of the portal, sort of being this thing out there that more prospects have taken advantage of. And I think it did slow down because some prospects got in the portal and got a little bit stuck there, right? But it's going to be even bigger now and going into next season because of this eligibility ruling that the NCAA gave, basically giving everybody a free year. There's going to be some guys that might look around and say, I want to go play in the SEC. And so South Carolina is obviously going to have a tremendous opportunity for receivers. If they can sell that and find some guys that can help and get them eligible, then that's certainly something that they're definitely looking. They're definitely going to be open to that. And we heard that, prior to last season, we knew that South Carolina was going to eye a grad transfer running back if one came about that made sense that they could get. And then Tavian Feaster dropped in the transfer portal, and they were able to go get him. And certainly he did some good things. So anticipate the same, at receiver. Linebacker, you look at Staten, which I didn't know until I looked last night. He was originally a walk-on at Samford West. So he's really worked his way up from a walk-on at Samford to, an All-American, a tie there to Will Muschamp. Staten's former coach there at Samford is Chris Hatcher, who Muschamp coached under at Valdosta State. So some obvious ties there. I wonder if North Carolina will get involved. Not sure how much of a need they have, but Staten's got a lot of family ties to UNC. I think both parents went there and another family member as well. So we'll see. But definitely a storyline to continue watching and going forward in terms of the transfer portal.
Cartwright asked about uniforms. I would anticipate, I guess South Carolina will put out the battle armor video today, but I would anticipate white helmets, garnet jersey, and white pants. So classic look for the Gamecocks this week. And Chris, you want to tell everybody real quick about how they can come hang out with us tomorrow afternoon, Friday afternoon at Angry Fish Brewing in Lexington?
Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. Going out there to do a happy hour with Kenny and the guys at Angry Fish, 106 Fabrister Lane, Fabrister Lane in Lexington. Just turn right off the main highway there on the right and go down a little bit, Unit C. Indoor and outdoor seating. Wes and I will be there for an hour or so at 4:30 to 5:30. So come out, locally sourced and brewed craft brews. They are outstanding. They're also going to have their Angry Eats Grill and Smoke food truck out there later in the evening, not at 4:30, but a little bit later. If you want to come hang out, come meet us, come talk, come enjoy yourself inside or outside at Angry Fish. Gamecock fans and great guys.
Yep. So we're looking forward to that. Real quick, somebody asked Tylan Evans, any chance at him for South Carolina? From everything I've heard, I don't really anticipate much happening there. So we'll see, but I don't think Evans will end up at South Carolina. That's going to do it for this show, but we'll be back on tomorrow at Angry Fish. Hopefully we'll see y'all either on the YouTube channel or out there in person. Love to meet some of y'all, and we'll have a good time of it. It'll be great. For Chris, I'm Wes. We'll see you tomorrow.